Hello, today we're talking about two books called The Resurrectionist, one by Kathleen S. Allen and one by Rae Dunlap. These are both Victorian Gothic horror novels. They have a lot of the same aesthetics and sort of themes. They both deal with body snatching. Neither of these books are about lesbians. Hello, welcome to Mostly Sapphic Books, where I mostly read Sapphic books, but not today. One of these books is about straight people, and one of them is about gay boys. I was just intrigued by the summaries of these. They're about body snatching in the Victorian era, and I was like, that sounds pretty cool. And both of these books just came on my radar, and I wanted to read them, so I did. And also, one of them has a beautiful cover. We will start with that one. That one's The Resurrectionist. So's the other one. The Resurrectionist by Kathleen S. Allen is about this teenage girl named Dilly O'Deal. Her father was a doctor. He has recently passed away, and she wants to follow in his footsteps and become a doctor. But now, with him dead, their family's sort of destitute. Also, she's a woman in the Victorian era, and, she's allowed to be a nurse, but she's not allowed to be a surgeon, like she wants to be. Even her sister, she has a twin sister, they're identical. Her sister's, a very typical girly girl who just wants to get married and have kids. Doesn't really support her sister's pursuit to become a surgeon. But she discovers in her father's things a notebook where he was Frankensteinianly working on a sort of resurrection cure. The cure to death. He was working on how to extend life, resurrect a dead body, and he kind of figured it out. It's a sort of a Frankenstein retelling in that way. Not exactly, but it definitely has those elements, and you can see the influence there. She ends up meeting this boy who is the son of her father's rival, so the son of another surgeon, who is also researching this sort of cure to death. But it's all underground, of course, and it's sort of a fringe movement, and it's very illegal. The son is involved in body snatching. He is also trying to, figure out this elixir of life, whatever that may be. And so he is sort of stealing corpses from the graves, which is a whole thing in the medical testing of the era. So Dilly sort of befriends this boy and ends up cross-dressing as another boy so that they can go rob graves together and she can sort of do her experiments. That's the queerest thing about this book. It's not queer, but she does cross-dress as a boy named Dan, and she seems to like it because she has so much anxiety about being a woman of this time and all of these expectations on her and all of the prejudice she faces, and that she kind of likes walking through the world as a boy. Also, Jack the Ripper is here. Dilly doesn't know Jack the Ripper is around in London. I saw one review of this that was a 1-star review. I like this book. I gave both of these books 5 stars. But I saw one review that was like, how in the world does Dilly not know that Jack the Ripper is terrorizing London? She'd have to be living under a rock, and I do think that's true. I'm pretty sure that was a very spectacular case at the time. That was top bill news. She has no idea who Jack the Ripper is. So that's sort of a story going on in the background here, sort of a subplot. But she's able to avoid Jack the Ripper at night by dressing up as a boy. So the cross-dressing is functional to the plot and has nothing to do with gender or queerness at all, but I kind of like to read it that way a little bit, just for funsies, just for me. I guess I have to get into spoilers a little bit here, so if you don't want spoilers, don't watch this, but also do not read the description of this book. Do not read the first chapter, which is a little prologue, which is a flash forward to the end of the book where it spoils all of the major twists of the book in the first few pages. And also, do not read the cover of this book. The cover of this book has a tagline that is 5 words long and spoils multiple twists. I guess it isn't spoiling it if the book starts with that little prologue that spoils the whole book on its own. Honestly, I think you could skip that prologue. I honestly think I might have enjoyed this even more if I hadn't read that, knowing where this was going to end, and I had been surprised by those plot points. One of the twists happens halfway through the book, and the other twist is the last scene, like the end of the book. And so why does the book spoil itself repeatedly? Before you even open the book, if you read the tagline on the front of this book, on some editions, they changed it on some editions spoil it. Just don't read it. It's 5 words. Don't look at it. But if you read the cover of the book, you're spoiled. But also if you read the first chapter of the book, you're spoiled, so I guess you're just fucked. But I think it would be interesting to go into this book not reading that first chapter or the cover or the tagline, which I know literally no one has ever done unless they have been instructed to do that. I do think it would be interesting to see how the story would pan out if you didn't know the spoilers. So I'll talk about the spoilers because I liked them. I feel weird talking about. I don't know. I talk about spoilers a lot on this channel. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. It just depends on the book. But yeah, the tagline on the book is "She killed her sister twice," which is a great tagline. Like, that's really catchy. That's very intriguing. I would like to know more, but it also spoils the book. So when the book starts, like the first chapter, again, there's the prologue, and then we get into like the actual action. It starts at the girl's father's funeral, and I'm reading that, and both of the twins are still alive, and I'm like, damn, their father just died, and you know, this sister, she's gonna die any second now. She doesn't die until halfway through the book. And because that happens, like, so late into the book, I'm like, why spoil that? Like, that's kind of fun. I mean, I guess I get it, because it does make for an interesting hook. You are hooked in by that premise. I was, and the book isn't even about lesbians. I barely read anything if it's not about lesbians. But also, like, you sort of know where the story is going because it's a resurrection tale. You know she's going to resurrect her dead sister. I forget if the description actually says that, but, like, you sort of know that's coming. I guess you wouldn't know that was coming if you didn't read it. I think this would be interesting to read, not having all those spoilers front-loaded. Literally front-loaded on the front of the book. And then the "she killed her sister twice" thing spoils that, you know, obviously the resurrection, something is gonna go wrong, and she's gonna have to kill her sister again. And, you know, which, I mean, it's a sort of a Frankenstein retelling. I guess you know that it's going to end in the sort of resurrected monster's demise here. So maybe it's not a spoiler. It's not, like, that surprising that the story goes there. But, like, that is, like, the very end. And I'm like, I don't know. I would have liked to maybe not know that in advance. But it was still a good book, and I still liked it, and I still really liked the story arc. And I liked the character arc of her discovering this elixir of life and needing to use it on her sister. Even when her sister's, like, totally against that and totally against this medicine and thinks this research of her father's is, like, blasphemy in the eyes of God, and, you know, and then she gets resurrected, and, like, now she's a part of this. Like, it's a really interesting character arc for both of them. There is one twist that this book does not spoil, which is, again, at the very, very, very end. So, like, the last couple of pages. There's a good twist that I sort of saw coming. I wasn't quite sure. There were inklings that, you know, it could mean different things. We keep getting inklings in the father's journal of that he has tried this resurrection method before, because he knows the formula and he knows how it works. And it's like, if he knows how it works, who did he resurrect? And I had a couple of guesses, and one of them was correct. There's only so many characters, I suppose. But that was interesting, and I really liked that. I really liked this book a lot. I thought the vibes were really nice. I like the macabre, kind of grave robbing. I like that this sort of had a female lead in the story, in this very male-dominated field. I like twins. If you know, you know. I like the characters here. I like the story. I like the vibes. 5 stars. Also, beautiful cover. That cover really drew me in. That's just a good cover. Very enticing. I like the green. I like the dress design. It's just really eye-catching with the mask, the death mask. Interesting. Beautiful book. Much more interesting cover than the other book, which I guess I'll talk about now. The Resurrectionist by Rae Dunlap doesn't have any of the fantasy elements of The Resurrectionist by Kathleen S. Allen, but it does deal with the similar sort of themes of body snatching and the Victorian era and medical school and education and stuff like that. It's about a boy. He's from England. His family is sort of destitute again. Their father's just died. He was a gambling man, and so he's in all of these debts, and his family's kind of in dire straits now. But he moves to Edinburgh to study at the medical college in Edinburgh to become a physician, a surgeon. And because the family's having money problems, he sort of can't afford his tuition. He also gets into grave robbing in order to pay for his tuition, because he's going to the university, but is also interested in these private colleges where you can actually handle specimens close up. And those private colleges are the ones who need all of the cadavers to do for their displays and their classes. And they also just have shows where anyone can pay to come watch you cut open a dead body, which doesn't sound fun to me, but I guess That was what they did for fun back then. No, thank you. This felt really historical. I mean, the last book was also historical, but this, I feel like, really got into maybe more realistic historical elements because we aren't dealing with the fantasy resurrection element. We're dealing with just dead bodies. And the idea of the resurrectionist comes from we're taking these corpses and we're giving them second life in that they're being used for a purpose to advance medical knowledge and, further the world and further education and improve people's lives. And there is a seedy underbelly part to this. Our main character is in it for the education and like understands the value of these corpses as learning tools, but there are people who are just in it for the money and the grave robbing, and they're in the seedy underbelly of the world and caught up in other crimes as well. There's a reference to Burke and Hare, who in this book are body snatchers, but they don't grave rob, they just kill people and then sell the corpses. And I read a bit in the description or in an author's note or somewhere where those were real people and they did that. There was an element of realism to this that I liked. I don't know like how historically accurate it is with the Burke and Hare story specifically, but there's a lot of just descriptions of, the daily life and the kind of pubs these people go to and the sort of lodgings. He's sort of from a wealthy English family, but now he's sort of destitute and he's in this, Scottish tavern living above this bar and like these sort of squalid quarters. And then he sees other houses that are like even worse than his lodgings. And we learn a lot about the medical field at the time and like just the practice of grave robbing and how that, aided this industry and the medical industry and how people were trying to stop that, but also how the grave robbers got around it. There's a lot of like gross descriptions of actually exhuming bodies and like having to cut off heads because they would tie the bodies down. And I found that really interesting and like gross, but in a fun, macabre way. I mean, I'm reading a gothic horror novel, so I want those things. But I really liked the sort of grounded nature of this. I feel like I learned something. And I like that about this. I also really like the writing style of this. This book feels long. Let me look at the page count. It's only 337 pages. The audiobook was actually not that. I don't remember how long the audiobook was. I listened to this on audio. It sort of felt long, but in a slow kind of ish paced way, not in a bad way. I feel like every single scene in this book is lived in. It spans a good amount of time. I think like a full school year of him at school. And there's a lot of moments that feel like you could write this shorter. Like you could breeze past this. Like him moving into his house and him going to the school for the first time. Like you could abbreviate all of these scenes and make it really, really, really fast. But you're never mad at the length of these scenes because the writing is so good and like immersive. Like you're really in the scene. We really get the description here. I really like these characters too. I really got a full sense of this main character's life as sort of a wealthy Englishman, as a young man fish out of water in a new city, adjusting to a new income, a totally new life, discovering this passion that he has for surgery. He didn't know he was going to be a surgeon when he got here. He just knew he wanted to study medicine. And it takes a little while for him to adjust to this idea of grave robbing. He's sort of this very naive young man, and he didn't realize that all of these corpses were grave robbed corpses. And at first he's appalled by this, and then he sort of understands the medical side of it, the scientific side of it. He sort of very naturally progresses into this new person, into this new life, and it's not very sudden and jarring and, moving the plot along for the sake of moving the plot along. I think it feels very natural. It flows really nicely, and again, it's just immersive. I think that's a good word for this writing style. It was also very intentional. Again, it's not like details for the sake of details where like you're bogged down with like all of this daily life humdrum. Like every little thing in this book seems to come back or like have a purpose. The pub he works at, the first time they haul a dead body like up to his quarters, up to his room, they use the body as like a fulcrum, as like a physics point. They talk a lot about physics, but that ends up happening at the end where they have to use a dead body, like with the ropes, and like it's a whole thing. I won't spoil anything. Certain side characters become important later, and like all these little details end up informing the story and like coming back in a really satisfying way where you can tell the author had so much intentionality and had really mapped out the story, and like all of those details that are immersive and like slow, like they actually play a role. They're there for a reason. I thought this was a really beautifully written book and like really well done, and I think the prose itself feels accurate to the time, not in a way that's hard to read, but in a way where you have all these like sort of archaic lines, but they sound really beautiful, and I think they really fit, and I think they fit this character who's absolutely a bookworm and is sort of upper class, and I thought this was very well intentioned and well executed, and just like a really, really good book, actually. Solid 5 stars. I think this one might be technically better than the other one, the other Resurrectionist. But I gave both of them 5 stars. I really like both of them. They kind of have different vibes. Also, this one has gay boys. He meets one of the other, like, medical assistants who's into grave robbing, who kind of gets him into it. They have they have a romance. It's pretty cute. They start off not quite enemies, but, confrontational, because the other guy's already a medical assistant, and here's this new hotshot coming in, and it's like, you can't even afford to be here, like, who are you, and then they bond over all the illegal activity, and they also butt heads over that, but they come to really like each other. And I actually thought like that love interest character was going to be the bad guy, because again, I read like in the description or the author's note or something, there were like real serial killers involved in this, and for some reason I thought that was the boyfriend character, and we were gonna get the reveal that he was evil, but it wasn't. He was a good guy. I'd confused Burke and Hare with Nye. But yeah, there's gay boys. If you're into that, people are into that. People like gay boys more than lesbians. If you want good gay boy literature, here you go. Here's your Victorian body snatching gay boys. It's well written and really deep, and like has a lot of depth to it as a text, and I think you'll like it if you're into gay boys. So we read something queer today. It's not just me talking about heterosexual books, but I'm really glad these were good, because I don't read a lot of straight fiction or gay fiction, anything except lesbians. I'm a lesbian. I love books about lesbians. I spent so much time as a kid looking for books about lesbians, and there weren't any. And so now, as an adult, there's so many books about lesbians, and I get to luxuriate in that, and it's awesome. Sometimes I read a book description that really catches my eye, and I liked this macabre vibe, the body snatching. I like the Jack the Ripper kind of thing. I liked the Frankenstein kind of thing. It was interesting. It was a good little taste. And I liked that both of these books had the same titles. I think I had confused them at one point. I'm not quite sure how I heard about these books. I've known about them for a little while, a couple years. Whichever was the second one, I remember going, I've heard of The Resurrectionist. That looked interesting. And then I realized it was 2 books. And I was like, let's read those back to back, because my library had them. I'm like, yay. Fun times. And they were both great. That's good. If I had read a 1-star book about straight people, I'd be mad about it. You know what I mean? Like, I could have been reading a mediocre book about lesbians instead. But no, these were both great books, and I recommend them if you're into gothic horror. But that's it. Good books. Have a good night.